I'm very pleased to be here on My Magical Thing with Carrie of Scorched Earth Tarot, a diviner with particular interest in what I guess we might call shadow work, warrior and witch. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you
Thank you
so much.
so much for having me.
You're very welcome, my friend. Carrie, please may we see your magical thing?
You may indeed see my magical thing. Now, anybody who knows me or spent any time around me at all will know that I am completely obsessed with books. So here is my magical thing. It is The Projection of the Astral Body by Muldoon and Carrington from 1929. Actually, let me open this up because the two authors are the scariest looking chaps you've ever seen in your life, right? So here is Sylvan Muldoon there. Check him out.
Yes.
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 Completely terrifying. And also, oh, no, I've lost him. He's gone. Actually, the other chap isn't quite as terrifying as that one, but very, very scary looking dudes. Very Victorian.
So tell us the story of the book.
So, the story of the book is kind of is how the book came into my possession. It took a number of decades, actually. So I met my first husband when I was about 17, and he was a little bit older than I was, and he'd had a fairly prolific career in psychedelics, shall we put it, before we'd got together. And we sat talking one night, and I asked him, how it was that he got into that sort of thing, and he told me the story about a book that his father had owned, that he'd seen on the shelf one day when he was about maybe 14 or 15, something like that, and he swiped the book and squirreled it off to his room and read it from cover to cover. And it was The Projection of the Astral Body, and he said he followed the steps and the exercises that the authors had set out there, and to his absolute amazement, he astrally projected. And he said it was the most incredible thing that he had ever experienced in his life. And he kind of wandered around his room, looked at his body as you do, and kind of, wandered around. And then he thought what he would quite like to do is see if he could go up through the ceiling to the attic. And he poked his head up through the ceiling. And instead of being presented with the attic, he was actually presented with this black, yawning chasm of space. And he was like, oh, this is unexpected. I didn't expect this at all. And he said he started getting swooped by sort of shapeless entities. And he was really quite frightened by the experience and shot back down, straight back into his body, and vowed never to do it again, ever. In the intervening period, his father noticed the book in his room and went, don't ever read that book. Don't read that book, and swiped it away and got rid of it, right? I was like, that's a very, very interesting story. The reason that it got him into psychedelics was because he could do psychedelics without leaving his body, and he felt a bit safer, having seen what he'd seen before. But it also solidified for him the fact that there was something much more than what our understanding of reality was in the here and now. So fast forward about 3 or 4 years later, and we'd gone up to visit his parents in North Yorkshire. They lived in a tiny little Dales village, and one night we had quite a bit of Jameson's whiskey, and his father started opening up about some of the strange experiences that he'd had back in the 60s, because it turned out he'd had a bit of a psychedelic career as well. And the conversation turned around to this book, and my husband and I kind of looked at each other like, because obviously his father had never known that he'd actually read the book and done the things. And then his father described exactly the same experience as my husband had had. Instead of getting scared by it, though, he kind of pushed it a little bit too far, and then spent about 3 years under almost constant psychic bombardment. Every time he tried to sleep, he was getting swooped by these things. And this was very, very interesting for me, because I forgot to mention, when I was in my early teens, one of the things that really, no, I wasn't. I was about 10, actually. I discovered the Dennis Wheatley books. Oh my God, I loved them so much. And a huge part of that is astral projection. So I found all of this absolutely fascinating. I found real life people who've done this. And that was that. There was no indication that the book ever still existed. A few years after that, my husband passed away. And then a couple of years after that, I got a phone call from my mother-in-law, and she said, Carrie, I'm getting rid of a box of books. Do you want to have a riffle through it before I send them to the charity shop? And I went, yeah, absolutely. I'll come down. And there's this big box, and I'm going through it. And then right at the very, very bottom, there was this. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting battered old book. And I picked it up, and I looked at the title. Now, I'd never been told the title or the authors or anything like that, but I could feel it almost vibrating in my hands, like it was so happy to make my acquaintance. And I sat there with my mouth open, and I looked at it, and I went, is this the... And she went, oh, it's a silly book. It's an absolutely silly book. You shouldn't even pay any attention to that at all. And I was like, are you joking? This is the book. This is the book. This book's coming home with me. And so it did indeed come to live with me. As an interesting aside, then my second husband, who computer programmer and absolutely not in any way particularly spiritual, he read the book. He followed the exercises. He too had slightly different but equally terrifying experience with it. And so I was like, oh, okay, because I had not read it up until that point. It sort of sat there on the bookshelf being like, when it's time, you can read me, but not yet. Now, the reason why it's my magical thing is because it's on a number of different levels, right? So it's a connection to my late husband, who has since gone, you know, he's gone, he's come back again, right? He's around. And so it has huge sentimental value. But it also taught me something else, which is, having watched the experiences of these three men who were very, very important to me, it really underscored for me the importance of spiritual protection, right? Particularly when you're kind of out there doing something that is a little bit new without people around you. But it also showed me that it was possible to follow the steps, prescribed steps, and have something work and have the experiences be completely different depending on your experience. And that actually has been then my experience, because I think for a lot of people, they kind of expect to, follow the steps and get exactly the same result as everybody else. And it doesn't really take into account that your experiences will change, that your perceptions will change, that experience, how far you are open to a particular thing will change from person to person. And actually my experience of this book is completely different, and something that it took me quite a long time to get my head around, because it's ridiculous, really, to try and explain it to somebody who isn't really interested in this kind of thing. Well, so this is my experience. They'd be like, are you sure? And I said, hand on heart, I have not taken any psychedelics whilst doing the work in this book. It's absolutely legitimately a shift. But it's been quite profound. Sorry.
To say thank you. That's just an amazing story and a really good. Could you hold the book up again, Carrie, just so we can have another look at the spine in case people want to rush out and buy one?
I actually think that it is now out of copyright. Into the middle. There we go.
Ah, yes.
I believe it's out of copyright now. It's in the public domain, so it is possible for you to find this on PDF on the internet. A Latvian witch friend of mine, who has incredible Google foo, managed to find it, and so she has a copy now too. So yeah, there you are.
Thank you so much for introducing us to that remarkable, personally historic and clearly very powerful magical thing.
You are very welcome. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share it with you.
I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.